Hey, welcome back. This is a video that's quite different to others. I speak with Ryan at length about what it means to be someone who serves, and in a way that's to serve other people and to serve God. There are a couple of things in here which might, Channel 4 might call it a trigger warning or something. We talk about sort of mental health aspects. We talk about PTSD in some ways, and we also talk about suicide. So please do be aware, maybe this isn't the thing to watch. I'll chapter head it as well, and you can decide what you want to watch. Ryan's an incredible guy. He's lived a life that's just kind of pretty bonkers, the stuff that you see in films. He was in the military for 18 years total. He was a Green Beret. He got incredibly injured in Afghanistan. He won the Purple Heart, the Silver Star, a few Bronze Stars. I mean, the guy's pretty incredible. And we talk about faith, we talk about service, we talk about purpose. And this conversation is just a really, I don't know, it kind of, it's just raw, I guess, is the best way to describe it. And maybe watch it with that in mind. He's obviously in a time where he's pretty vulnerable. He's just in between. It's almost like the holiday period before he returns to Ukraine and keeps the project working with the team that he talks about at the end. I got in touch with him through the Ukraine stuff, and I was really interested in what he does. Hopefully I'm going to get out there and film with him. But this is a kind of conversation beforehand, and he's just incredibly honest. He doesn't dress anything up. Our conversation isn't, there's no sort of flexing, there's no competition. It's just incredibly honest. Like, this guy's been through a lot and he just says it as it is. So please do watch this. Let me know what you think of it. Please encourage him. Please follow him on socials. They're all sort of included down below. Please support the charity or the NGO that he runs called Tip of the Spear. And send him some encouraging messages. Please also subscribe to this. Thanks ever so much. You said you've had a bit of a tough week.
Yeah, I mean, just gone through some therapy treatment, um, just TBI and PTS related. So, but it's all based off of psychedelics.
Right?
Yeah, so it's like ibogaine and DMT. So, um, yeah, it's just a psychedelic dive into your subconscious and kind of figuring out, what's right, what's wrong, or not really what's right, but who you are,
Yeah.
and bringing everything to the surface so you can start to work on everything, because it's very it's very difficult without some sort of assistance, um, to sit back and say, okay, I'm gonna dive deep into my childhood and start to unravel all those feelings, or start to unravel the pain, or what caused the trauma. And the same thing with the military. It's when you see, when you have friends killed, and um and you go through trauma of war. It's very easy to, like in my case, I understand that that's part of war.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like, yeah, I mean, people die in war and the enemy has a vote, and you know, um, and that's just the way it is. But that's also a defense mechanism to keep from actually, um, kind of dissecting, everything, and you just keep pushing it to the side, or in my case, you just keep putting all that weight in your rucksack until it just gets too heavy to carry, and then you start, and then that's when some of the outbursts, or the substance abuses, or um, alternative methods to numb the pain.
Yeah.
That's when that starts to come in, because you can no longer deal with it anymore, and so you start to look for relief, and um, even on a spiritual level. I mean, it's I'm a prime example of that, because I am a Christian, and I believe in God, and I know, when I die, I have faith that I am going to heaven. But even talking with God to try and get to the, to the core um, issues or what's causing this,
Yeah.
it's very hard to do it on your own.
Yeah, it
And
is.
so, in my, I guess one of my attempts to start to rebuild my life, back better again, not only for myself, but for my family and for the job that we do. Our job is we're servants. We go to Ukraine and we volunteer and we remove landmines and to be a better asset and, um, just everything that revolves around a life of servitude. Yeah, I had to address a lot of these issues that some I've been carrying around since, you know, between the most influential years of my life, between 1 and 5 years old.
Right.
Yeah. And so, yeah.
So I mean, well, I haven't read your book. I've listened to it. I bought it on Audible,
Yeah.
and so I know part of your story, at least the story that you've shared in your book, and I think almost like you're setting the tone now for our conversation, and it feels like I feel like we're going to be quite real
Yeah.
about this stuff, and if you're happy to be, let's kind of do it. And this isn't about me being real with you more than I need to. I think like I'll have a conversation and I'll tell you how I'm approaching things, but this isn't about me. This is for me. This is for a bunch of people to hear your story. And I think you've mapped it out already. Like when you serve, you give away what you have.
Yeah.
And when you
If
don't
you're truly serving, yeah.
and when you don't have much left, it's really difficult to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the conversation almost I feel like might be good to kind of go from that. when
Yeah.
when you've had plenty to give, what have you been doing? And maybe a bit more like now when you don't have much, but you're still giving a lot. How do you get through that? So
Yeah.
I guess the thing that kind of stands out for me, like looking at things from a kind of faith perspective, was what you sort of spoke about with your father and how he was a Vietnam vet, right?
Yeah.
And he got to a stage once he'd got home with kind of dealing with some of the things that you were talking about. But then he met like a minister or a pastor, right?
Yeah.
So I just wondered, and then the kind of what does that mean for your story as well? Like I'd even though maybe you've just been through it this week and you're feeling like pretty flat, but you're at home. How can
Yeah.
we have a conversation about the hope of the thing, the hope that we have, and our hope comes from faith. So maybe but if there's a way we can kind of interweave some of your stories. So the way that I found out about you and I got in touch with you originally was, and I've just got back from Somaliland from a very so there were two people I found. I'd driven a bunch of trucks to Ukraine. I've driven 3 trucks, right? So I went to Kiev. I met Mamaka, the commander of the Georgian Legion. I was thinking that was going to be the story I was going to tell. This
Yeah.
guy who, again, he says he's a Christian, and he's leading the most feared group of people by the Russians, and that didn't work out. I then came back and I was thinking, well, who are the people that demonstrate faith, that demonstrate
Mm-hmm.
service in Ukraine? There's a lot of people in the UK and around Europe who almost give out their wealth or they give out of adventure. But
Mm-hmm.
who are the people that serve? And so this other guy I met, he works with a charity called Feed the Hungry,
Mm-hmm.
and they take out huge parcels of food and run soup runs and go to support the chaplains on the front line. So Gwyn was one guy who I found. You were the other guy, and you taking apart IED, taking apart mines and sort of EXO and that kind of stuff. I had a bit of experience in Iraq when I was covering guys make Mosul safe after it was liberated.
Yeah.
And I know that progress and rebuilding and knowing that you're safe in your home doesn't happen unless guys like you clear the way.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, having this conversation with me is great because I've wanted to speak with you for ages, right?
Hmm.
Hopefully, I'll get to see you in Ukraine too.
Yeah, absolutely.
But and part of what I want to do in this conversation is champion the work that you're doing, tip of the
Hmm.
spear, and hopefully some people can think, wow, how can I help? you know.
Yeah.
But let's have a kind of conversation, maybe in reverse. I don't know what suits you, but like, yeah, I think maybe in reverse. Like, why on earth did you set up a charity where I know, like, it's not like you're making a shed ton of cash?
Yeah.
um, why is it you set up this organization? What was it in you that needed to do that?
I mean, so going back to before Afghanistan, before the full withdrawal of Afghanistan, I left Afghanistan July 2021. So not the end, but pretty close to the end, right?
Yeah.
And it was after we closed Bagram. And I remember coming home, and I was lost is one word. Um, Disgusted is another one, but all these unanswered questions as far as, what was it for, the people that we lost. I mean, I stepped on an IED in Afghanistan that almost cost me my life. And that pain that I went through, and the amount of life changing surgeries and rehabilitation. And then I went back to Afghanistan,
I, well,
7 more times.
24. I read you had 24 surgeries, right, or more, on your foot.
Nah, 27 just on my right leg, and then probably another 6 or 7 throughout the rest of my body, recovering from that blast.
And
But
and I mean, within a year, you'd gone, you got back into the Green Berets. I mean, it's just like within a year, right?
yeah,
Was that
it was 18 months. I
right?
was back from when I stepped on the IED to when I was back in Afghanistan was 18 months. But we had given so much, and I was part of the withdrawal. So closing down bases, and a couple bases we closed down, I have memories of where we lost friends and blood was shed and stuff. And so when I got home and I started dissecting everything that happened, I just remember going to a very, dark place, and kind of, self-induced, obviously, because, to a point you can control your emotions, but I allowed myself to go to this place because it felt good to be angry. It felt good to be a victim of something that I can't control. I can't control the withdrawal. I can't control political decisions made. That's far above me. Um, but it felt good to be angry, to be victimized by it, and I just kept getting deeper and darker. And alcohol was a very good stimulant, depressant for it. And I just, now what? What's my life? Who's Ryan Hendrickson? And I remember, February uh, 2022 rolls around, and I'm watching the TV the same as everybody else is, and the full scale invasion of Ukraine takes place. And as I'm watching all this unfold on TV, I just kept having this nagging feeling about, I wonder if there's something that I could do. I wonder if there's a way that I can help. And I would self sabotage it or talk myself out of it. Like, nah, it's Ukraine. It's like, where exactly is Ukraine again? And all these other just thoughts, and just talking myself out of it. But that feeling and those emotions of, I wonder if there's something that I could do to help, they just kept day and night. Even when I'm sleeping, I'm thinking about it. And I was talking with one of my good friends, David Cunningham, and his family. They founded the international missionary organization YWAM.
Yeah.
Uh, and so we're talking, and he's telling me about this campus that YWAM has in Kyiv, and that majority of the missionaries have already evacuated, but there's this group of Ukrainian missionaries that are left that are driving around suburbs and evacuating women and children
Wow.
and the elderly. And I just, the question that I asked, changed the trajectory of my life forever. And it's like, well, is there a way I can go over and help? So we start, talking, and then talking turns into planning, and then planning turns into plane tickets, and plane tickets turns into middle of March. I'm sitting in Kyiv. I'm like, oh, okay. And this work that we're doing, and just helping people, all of a sudden I start to feel this sense of purpose and kind of relief. And that's the wrong way of putting it, because this is a country at war where thousands of people are dying. But I start to find this purpose and relief in myself through service and being a servant to others and helping other people. And but I hadn't quite pinned it down at that time because we're so busy, that I wasn't quite able to dissect exactly what serving at that level was doing for me and the healing it was doing for me. But as the Russians started to conduct their withdrawal to the east in April of 22, civilians and just normal people started to come back to their homes, and they start to hit landmines, because they were the product of war or explosive remnants of war. And as this starts to happen, Ukrainians are kind of scrambling to create demining teams, to go out to address these issues, because the people are coming back. And at that time it was still kind of the Wild West, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying the Ukrainians didn't have control over the situation, but it's a country that has just been invaded by one of the top 3 militaries in the world. And so there was a lot of there not everything was running fluidly,
Yeah.
in a controlled manner.
It was just so
And
vast.
so,
It's just, well, it is
yeah,
just there's such a vast problem, isn't there?
yeah. And so I start to help out these territory defense teams, that have been, tasked with demining their areas. And it goes from, training, because in Afghanistan, as a Special Forces engineer, I've recovered thousands of IEDs and landmines. And so I had an idea. I'm not an expert, but I had an idea. And that idea was a lot more than some of these kids had. And so I start training them up, and then I see this need for equipment. And I'd raise money through social media, to get detectors and demining equipment. Go home, pick it up, fly back with all this equipment, work with the unit. Okay, they're good to go. Donate all the equipment over to them, and then do this over again. And when I start to realize, how much that had impacted my life for the better, having this purpose again,
Yeah.
this sense of service through helping others, being a servant to others, I thought that this could be something that could help, so many veterans that have gave so much in Iraq and Afghanistan, OIF. And so, yeah, I decided to put in, for the nonprofit status, the 501c3 status, for one, because I wanted people that were donating to be able, at least in the United States, to be able to get, that tax deduction on their donation. It's only fair to them for opening up their hearts, and that's just a little bit I can give back to them. But also, I had this vision of creating a safe place for veterans that were struggling mentally as well. And And having a purpose and a sense of service again is such a huge part of mental health. And for some people, that's all you need, is you just need that purpose again. And then you can pull yourself out of whatever hole you're in, whether it's self-induced or not, and you can start to take your life back through serving others. And it was about that time, Ukraine is, when I started to renew my relationship with God again, and started to really try to dig deep into who I am, as a man, as a family member, as a husband, um, as a man of God. What does that mean? Like, it's easy to throw those terms around. I'm a man of God, but what exactly does that mean? How is God using you?
Yeah.
And I still, like, I think I'm on the I think I am I'm I'm walking through the doors that God's opening up for me to, to do his bidding, or to serve. But again, it's fake. It's like, I hope I'm doing, but God's opened a lot of doors, and so I
How,
can't see that this is not. Um, I can't see that I'm not walking in the path that He's asking me to, even though as a human being I stray left and right all the time. Um, but with that purpose and that direction, it's easy to get back on to, your north-seeking arrow of your compass and continue moving in the right direction, in the path that I feel that God has laid out for me, through my faith.
so a couple of things that kind of coming to mind. The first one is, how big a problem do you think that is of purpose for other people? Like, is that for you? It sounds like that's been a place, that's been the thing that's brought you out of stuff. It's almost like the two things that I would want to boil down what you've said is purpose and movement, and the two things that have led to really a really tough time of being sedentary and not having purpose.
Yeah, I mean, purpose is everything. I believe that, the mental health crisis, amongst first responders and veterans, not just in the United States, but a lot, the countries that served in Iraq and Afghanistan. I believe that the mental health crisis is contributing to suicide, and I believe that what is causing the mental health crisis, just in my belief, is um, a life without purpose. So as you're looking at your life and you have no purpose, and you're literally going through life, left, right, left, and every day's the same. You're not doing anything. You have no purpose. You're not serving anybody. There's nothing that tells you, hey, life is worth living. And as the demons, because the demons are there, and as they continue to build up in your mind, you start to see that this isn't worth it. Like, what's the purpose? All I do is I hurt, I wreck everything around me, I destroy, people around me and stuff like that. Whether you're doing it or not, that's what your mind's telling you.
Mm-hmm.
And my belief, it's the devil, speaking through. But a lot of veterans, unfortunately, and first responders have come to a point to where they said, all I'm doing is hurting everybody around me. I have no purpose. I have no direction. I have nothing. And I'm just gonna, I'm gonna make it better for everybody. And they choose to self-select. Um, and it's unfortunate, but that's, in my opinion, what's causing it is because lack of purpose, lack of service, um, is a world of pain, and you have no direction. You have nothing worth living for. That's in my opinion.
So I think, almost based on what you're saying now, we could have a conversation afterwards, but I'll put a couple of links of organisations that people can talk to. Right, if you're saying stuff where people are, that's, opening up something in them they just don't know how to deal with, They need to be able to talk to someone. So we'll have that conversation. I'll put a link in the bottom because
Yeah.
yeah. So it's almost worth then tracking back. So for me, I grew up in a Christian home,
Mhm.
and so my the rhythm of my week included church big time. You know,
Mhm.
it was a Baptist church, and I knew that on a Sunday it was almost like write off. I was involved in like Boys Brigade, which is like Scouts. You know, that was a Christian version. So we learnt to
Yep.
march, we learnt the Bible. You know, my the rhythm of my week was pretty kind of church and Christian focused in a lot of ways. For you, was that something that you grew up with? Was what? Where did faith and where did God fit for you?
Mhm. So yes and no. In the beginning, um, my life and my childhood was extremely bad. It was very there was there was a lot of abuse. There was a lot of um, confusion. I guess is really the only way I can put it into words. And the abuse. Some of it was sexual abuse at the hands of a stepmother. Others was neglect and and you know we grew up extremely poor. I remember this treatment therapy I just went through. They were like, as fast as you can, name one memory that comes to your mind from childhood. And I said hunger. I don't know why. I just that was the first thing that came to my mind is always being hungry.
Right.
Um, and or just the neglect. That hunger could have been for attention. That hunger could have been for food. That hunger could have been um, all kinds of things,
Yeah.
but hunger. And um, and so in the beginning, it was it was a bad situation. And then my dad found God, and he found God the night that he was trying to commit suicide. He had a shotgun, and he's going to put it up underneath his chin, and that would be it. And that's when, as we talked about a little bit earlier, a pastor or a person drove by to stop to see if my dad needed any help as he sat in his vehicle contemplating this. And that person ended up being a preacher at the local church, and that's when my dad found God. Um, and so after that, it was kind of the extreme, um, the 180 degrees extreme on the spectrum where it's like, I'm going to force you to not live the life that I did. And so it was very, very strict and very hard
Right.
and very controlling and very dominant.
Yeah.
Where my dad was trying to force us to not go down the same path he did, and which was the wrong answer. And so as high school, and as I'm getting ready to join the military, and a couple years before that is when my dad really found his evenness
Right.
with God. He really found his peace with God,
Hmm.
and that came through his actions and everything like that. Which so there was a lot of extremes in my childhood from you know abuse as a child, and lots of drinking and drugs, and being witness to all that, and seeing physical abuses, and you know uh, having some trauma from physical and sexual abuse on my side. But neglect was even worse than that, because although my dad was not the abuser, as in sexually or anything like that, he was always gone.
Hmm.
And so we were in the hands of people that did not have the best intentions. And so that neglect on my dad's part, which it really hurts him till this day, because he just didn't he had the same mindset I think a lot of people do. Why would anybody do this?
Hmm.
You're just a kid.
Right.
And so I guess naiveness or ignorance, and you know um, but now, my dad's my best friend, and he's what has kept me grounded um, through some really dark times, getting blown up in Afghanistan. The the amount of mental torment and anguish I went through with all that, which again, like you said, you listen to the book and I write about it, and it's that book's not a war, just counting war story. It's the story of redemption and mental health struggles and and getting control of your life again. But it wasn't until Ukraine that I actually feel like I finally found my purpose in life. Even 13 years as a Green Beret and all this other stuff that you think makes you who you are, but it
Well,
doesn't.
you've been awarded like, some of the highest recognitions from the
Yeah,
military, right? You,
yeah,
in terms of the kind of American hero, that's you, right? And yet there's still you can't. This purpose thing still keeps pulling you, right? It's
yeah,
not like, hey, well, I've done that then. I'm just going to drive around in a Corvette or something. Um,
yeah. No,
so, like, what if it's about Ukraine now? It's you say like there's this I don't know, this like coming home, or whatever language you would use about what's going on with you at the moment, like with your faith. So who have you got around you where there's this, because so to be, my experience is like a Tonka toy versus the car that you've driven, right? So I'm not trying to compare, but for me it was a big deal when I was in Iraq, and we saw that we were the first people in, along with contractors, right, in this old town where it had been compared to Dresden. The experience I had was breaking. I'd never seen any amount of destruction and the evidence of war, and just the amount of bodies, right?
yeah,
And the fat cats that walk around. I had no the smell. I had nothing to pin that on. The thing was, I couldn't reconcile that then
yeah,
with a church experience, where church talks about, where people in church and the vicars and the pastors, they all talk about, you know, I don't know, maybe one day you'll be a preacher, or maybe you'll be the worship leader, or whatever. It's always within the church. I couldn't bring my, and it, like, realistically it was 2 weeks. I was there twice, so it's I wasn't fighting. I was just there with a camera to capture what needed to be captured. But I couldn't bring together the reality that I'd seen, and the horrific end that man goes to destroy man. I hadn't never seen that before.
yeah,
And I couldn't bring that together with, like I was trying to remember all the psalms that I knew while I was walking through, and I was feeling sick from the smell, and I was feeling utterly, like, I was kind of had this weird tingling that was just odd. It's like an adrenaline mixed with fear, mixed with, I don't know what it's mixed with.
yeah,
And I was just praying, like, I was going, God, I can't handle this. And I remember I was like, I just need cigarettes. So I was just like chain smoking the cigarettes with the Iraqi guy who's my friend.
yeah,
And just to get rid of the smell, and just try and think, I need to do something with my hands, that isn't just holding a
yeah,
camera. And then I come home, and I remember going into the church. It was like Christmas. We were going, and
mhm,
the woman in there was the vicar or whatever, and she said, "Oh, you've got a tan. Where have you been on holiday?" And I said, "No, far from it." And she said, "You need to talk with someone about it. Have you had counselling?" Since then, some people have kind of spoken to me, but I just couldn't bring together this kind of, like, singing these songs, like, on a projector, and
yeah,
and being with all the people around me. It didn't make sense. It stopped. It was like, this isn't and I don't understand where this little bubble is. It does it. I don't know what it does. So
mhm,
how do you, like, in some respects, I'm demonstrating what you've said works for you. I'm looking for people who are saying, I'm doing this, I'm serving people. Because that for me is like, I'm like, that seems to make sense in terms of faith. But at the
Yeah.
moment, I'm not figuring out how to make sense of church at all within that. How are you how are you doing that? How have you done that? Or are you in a similar boat to me?
I'm in a similar boat because a lot of what you're explaining right now is what so many veterans go through. And it's the fact that people don't understand. It's not that you can't wrap your mind around it. Like human beings aren't meant to see trauma like that. But unfortunately, um, once, once we decided that we could live by our own means without God, this is what you get.
Yeah.
But I think what hurts or what plagues most people isn't the fact that they, trying to come to terms with what you saw or smelled or heard, all the senses.
Yeah.
Because death hits all the senses. Smell, the sounds, sights, stuff like that. It hits all those senses, and it becomes a part of you.
Yeah.
It really does. And where soldiers and veterans and are really good at is we just understand at that point in time this is a part of war, and it's not until later on when you have no outlet, because who's going to ever understand it? And so that's the reason why veterans groups are so big in the United States and probably in the UK as well, and stuff like that, is because you're in your tribe. People understand it. They've smelt that smell. They've seen those sights. They've heard, those sounds, and they can relate to what you're talking about. But when you're at church, like for me, sitting at church and I'm looking around at everybody, and they're worshiping in their own way, and and I almost felt betrayed, because it was like, you have no fucking clue
No.
what the real world is.
Like my comparison with my upbringing with yours, right? It's the same. It's the same. It's
Yeah.
completely like,
Yeah, like you have no idea why you're worshiping in the way you are. And that's very unfair for those people, because for me to put that kind of judgment on somebody, number one, who am I?
yeah.
But
Yeah,
but
totally.
number two is like, they are worshiping in a way that, they feel by their faith is best.
Yeah.
And every time I go to church, I would just judge everybody in there.
Yeah.
And it's not fair. And that's 100% self-induced. Like, I can't blame anybody. I can't blame war for that. I can't blame killing or seeing dead people for that. No, that is 100% self-induced, but it feels good, because now I have an excuse to continue with either anger or to live in this void of where nobody understands, and they're not going to. Like my dad said when I got blown up, he said, no one's going to understand this. You keep trying to force everybody to understand what you went through, what you did for them, and all this other make believe shit you got in your head. But even if they were there with you, they're not you. They're not going to understand. So quit trying to force people to understand you. He said, yeah, regardless of what you went through and how bad this is, he said, you're not the most important person in the room. He said, everybody has a life, everybody has struggles, and all those struggles may seem minuscule to you. It's not to them.
No.
And who are you to judge them that way? And that's, and I work on that. I do work on that. But no, as far as church goes, I do struggle with church, because I just, it's self-induced, but I just look around and I was like, you guys have no idea. It's like, and I battle time to time. It's like, yeah, I believe in God, but I also believe in the devil. And I also believe that a life without God everything absent of good. God is good. God is light. Everything absent of that is evil. And I mean, Garden of Eden, we made our choice. And now we have a world where people can slaughter each other, or little kids in the United States, it's like 1 out of every 4 little girls and 1 out of every 6 little boys is sexually, abused. Where we live in a world like you get on social media and you just see how evil
Yeah.
man is.
Yeah.
And now you're trying to make sense of it all. And then you go to places like Ukraine, you go to places like Iraq and Mosul, and you go, throw the dart at Africa,
Yeah.
literally.
Yeah.
But you're going all these places and you're seeing the absence of God. And
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
true evil. But then how do you reconcile all this? How do you make sense of it? Well, you don't. But you can guide your life, in my opinion, where I've been at now since I started going to Ukraine, is through service to others, through helping others. And it's bringing light to some very dark parts of me, to where, I don't really know how to explain it, but, there's a lot of darkness in everybody. You got to dig deep enough and you'll find it. But helping others and being a servant and doing it for the right reasons. Like you are here to help others.
Yeah.
You've given up your life to serve others, and like with you, bringing these images, these and bringing these situations that you've been a part of willingly, your own free will.
Yeah.
You went and you did this, but you're a servant because people need to know. People need to understand.
Yeah.
You're giving a voice to those that don't have a voice. Well, it's like soldiers, service members. We are servants to our country.
Yeah.
You dedicated your life to a life of servitude. And so for me, it's easy to be a servant, but to actually understand what it is and to actually adopt that, as your life, it's really healing. From what I've witnessed so far.
So the question that I've got, and in some ways, I think what you're saying would challenge my whole idea. So if it is, just say no, that's not right. But from my experience, like even this call, right? I was thinking, oh, man, I just had a little bit of an argument with my wife. I was like, oh, this is terrible timing. I want to be like all chill and like concentrating with you, and I've just had this like she was just having a go at me, and it wasn't a massive fight, but it was enough to kind of make me a bit grumpy, right? Yeah. The thing which I've always thought is serving comes from like the depth of me. So I thought like I can't give any more than I've got. Like I can't be more wise than I am. I can't be, and so there's this sense that okay, I need God. I need God to give me that wisdom. So He'll give you any of the words that you need, or whatever it says in the Bible. When you need that word, He will give you that word. Or when He doesn't put us through things more than we can handle. The various things in the Bible, right? There's this sense that God equips us to give away. A lot of people might just keep that to themselves, or they keep it into that church environment where they raise their hands and they have that experience. But what about when you've run out? How do you still do it? Like, what role does your faith play? Do you draw on your experience and the fact that you've put yourself through experiences, and you've been required to put yourself through experiences that a lot of us wouldn't ever do before? Have the reason you were awarded those medals. Do you rely on that stuff, or is there? Because what do you give out of is, I suppose, my question, because I've been to Ukraine 3 times, as I said, and we've had Ukrainian people stay with us, and this isn't meant to be a judgment that's anything more than my thought, but Ukraine's a hard place. A country at war has a sadness to it.
Yeah.
As soon as you go over the border, and you're on that train or however you travel, or when I've driven in vehicles, there's this sadness and there's this downturn. And yeah, there's the cultural thing that people don't smile to each other, which I find really hard. It's like, smile at me, if I'm allowed to say, But so there's that culture anyway, which is kind of the Eastern European, Russian kind of don't smile. But it's more than that as a country. There's a sadness, there's a fear, there's a mistrust.
Yeah.
And each time I come back, I've felt energized that I've done something useful.
Mm-hmm.
But it's cost me. It's been draining. Like I was in Somaliland last week, and I came back, and I'm still down. I feel worn out from being in that country.
It's because you care. If you didn't care, or if you weren't doing this for the right reasons, if you were just doing this for your own, I guess, accolades or self-esteem or something like that, then it wouldn't bother you. But the fact, what you just said to me told me everything about you. You're doing this because you believe in it. You believe in giving a voice to those that don't have one. Yeah, that's the reason why it bothers you. Right. It bothers you because in your heart and in your subconscious and in your being, you do want light over darkness. People can say, I that's a good person. What does a good person mean? Hitler thought he was a good person. What exactly is a good person? No, it's that you truly want light over darkness, and you truly do care about the human aspect, human beings, or else you wouldn't went to Somaliland. It's easy to focus on the big the big news, articles, or the big news subjects like Ukraine and Gaza and stuff like that. But what about all the suffering everywhere else? And you're going to these places because, you truly do. You want to give a voice to those that don't have one, and it bothers you because you're real. And there's a lot of fake people, that.
Yeah, but how do you?
There's a lot of fake people.
How do you handle? So I'm still like, how do I deal with this? Exercise really helps. Riding my motorcycle really works. But how? But that's just like a quick fix, right? For me, I still feel like I'm lacking that person who gets it, who can listen and makes me buoyant. How do you deal with it? Because I've no idea about what it means to be in the military, to be tip of the spear as you've been, as you are. But the comparison that we do have is you're serving in Ukraine now. How are you handling that kind of like the emotional cost or the spiritual cost?
So that's actually something that I'm trying to figure out, as we go. And I don't think there's a clear answer on how I'm handling it, but I do know that as I've given all the emotions that I could possibly give, and I just feel like I don't have anything else, to give. I do turn to God, and it's like, what do you want from me?
Yeah.
Like, what is it? What is it you're asking me to do? Because in the Bible, you said you're not going to put anything in front of me that I can't handle.
Yeah.
But yet, I don't feel I can handle this. And then all of a sudden, well, maybe not all of a sudden, but then I start to be able to see, the path or the direction He has me going in, and maybe I'm off course. But how you handle, all of that and be able to process it and everything like that is, for me, I have to keep it at the human level. I can't think too much into it. Number one, I don't have the brain power to do it. Like if you looked at my high school credentials, I just don't have the brain power to do that. But I have to keep it very simple, or else it's going to be too hard for me to even attempt or to try and negotiate, that mental minefield. And so with simplicity, I just like, okay, I don't know why, and I can't explain this suffering, and I can't explain this darkness, but I find the little bits of light that shine through it. That one farmer or family,
Yeah.
says thank you. And it's like, you lost everything. You don't gotta thank me. But they really mean it to
Hmm.
the core of their being. And so you get these glimmers of light in the darkness. And even though it's just little, it's so massive. Like, like that old story, and it's biblical, but that old story about, these sailors are lost at sea. The storm is about ready to take them over. They're gonna die at sea. Their ship's gonna go down. There's no hope for anything. And then all of a sudden, through the darkness, and the chaos of this storm, they see this light. It's a lighthouse. And you hear about it all the time. I'm like, yeah, cool story. But I actually been able to, like, feel those, the feelings those sailors had when they saw that lighthouse,
Yeah.
and that light and that hope, because hope is everything. Hope changes, people. Hope changes countries. Hope drives revolutions. Hope, um it's insane how powerful and contagious hope is.
Yeah.
Hope can topple dictatorships. Like, but you get that hope, that little glimpse of light, and that's hope.
Right.
But I also believe that's God.
Yeah.
And if it was going to be easy, if God was going to calm all the storms down, and you were going to sail right into the harbor, and life was easy, then it wouldn't be worth it. You're going to get that glimmer of light, but the storm's going to pick up because you're still battling light and darkness. But darkness, if you believe, darkness can't stop that glimmer of light from coming through. And as you continue to move towards that glimmer of light, or on the path that God has laid out for you, the light gets stronger and stronger and stronger, bigger and more powerful.
Hmm.
But unfortunately, a lot of us, and I'm extremely guilty of this, I will sit there and get tossed around and the shit beat out of me by this storm.
Yeah.
And I'll cry out, "Where were you? How come you're not here to help me?"
Yeah.
And I'm ignoring that glimmer of light.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's my opinion on it. Again, I don't know. That's just my opinion.
So, like, to sort of or like start thinking about now. So it'd be great to understand what you're doing with Ukraine right now. So you've been there pretty much since Russians try to get to Kyiv, right?
Yeah.
I've seen Bucha, I've seen Irpin, and there's still but crazy how quickly they're building up the building again, right?
Yeah.
It's just bonkers how Ukraine is so efficient at just going, we're going to nail this.
Yeah.
We need to rebuild. Incredible.
I got videos of going into Bucha and European, the day President Zelensky opened it up for Western reporters,
Wow.
and where it is from then
Hmm.
till now,
Yeah.
can't even recognize it.
No. No, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Um, but what are you doing now? Like how can people understand what to be supportive of the journey that you're on? So what I love about these kind of conversations is it's current, right? So what's
Yeah.
current at the moment? What's happening?
So right now, I mean, we're getting ready for our 11th mission, to Ukraine in September, and we have, our Ukrainian partners, and we're based out of Kharkiv.
Yeah.
And so we have our Ukrainian partners, and we conduct, mine action, missions, so humanitarian and operational mine action missions, and we're doing it in, civilian areas, farm fields or villages, and stuff like that. In a lot of these areas that we're working in is the areas that the Ukrainian government just doesn't have the resources to address. at this time, but there's still people there.
Mm-hmm.
And so, through our Ukrainian partners, we're helping to address a lot of those concerns with demining in these areas that it's just there's just too many, there's just too many landmines. I mean, 174,000 kilometers is contaminated in Ukraine. That's the size of Florida.
Oh my
And
goodness.
and so we're going to a lot of these areas that just aren't high on the list
Yeah.
for mining because it's just Ukraine is bogged down in fighting a war.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but people are still suffering, and there are statistics that aren't really public, as public as they should be, and that is the civilian casualties from landmines, and they're only increasing because people are tired. People are like, I'm going to take the risk because I want my land back, or I need to provide for my family, or I'm going to go do this, this, or this.
Yeah.
And it's causing, it's fatigue, it's war fatigue, and it's causing a lot of casualties. And that's what we are, that's our main focus is on these areas that, just because of, the situation cannot get the attention from the government right now that it needs.
Yeah.
And so we'll give it that attention, and it's our organization, Tip of the Spear, and our Ukrainian partners. And so we always work by, with, and through our Ukrainian partners because this is Ukraine.
Yeah, sure.
And not only are we giving them the donating the equipment they need to be successful, working with them on the minefields, but this is also helping them out financially. Here's a stipend, so you can provide for your family while you're doing this, this critical work.
Yeah.
And it's, it has second and third order effects of, putting back into the economy, revitalizing, areas, giving hope to people that just thought that, this is our life.
Yeah.
There's no answer. This is it. And you're given that hope. And so that's the mission, and we're doing it through U.S. and NATO veterans. And it's U.S. veterans and working together with Ukrainian veterans. The majority of our demining teams are all Ukrainian veterans that can no longer serve in a military capacity.
Yeah.
But they can continue their service through helping others through demining. And U.S. veterans working together with Ukrainian veterans for a Mine for Ukraine. And again, this is all veterans. We got a Canadian guy on the team. One of my really good friends is a Brit, and he's over in Ukraine doing great stuff, and help him out with everything I possibly can. And just people helping people. It doesn't have to be labeled. Just human beings helping human beings, and it's that little flicker of light through a lot of darkness. And I believe that.
Thank you for watching this video. It was a tough one to make and a challenging conversation. I hope you found it of value. Please do encourage Ryan and the charity and the NGO that he runs. Please, follow him on socials, and please do subscribe to this channel too, and you'll get an alert when we make another video. So thank you for watching it. Thank you for your time and your engagement, and have a lovely one.